Well, good morning, one and all. I'm really happy to be with you again this year for this great PariMat conference. As Régis said, we will be here until 1 p.m. tomorrow with keynotes, debates, roundtables, a lot of sequences so that we can discuss the main challenges in the business. Well, to begin with, we'll immediately talk about containers lost at sea with our two speakers, who I'll understand. I have with me Uwe SCHIEDER. Hello, Uwe. You are Vice President of the Loss Prevention Committee of IUMI. We know this is the representation of maritime insurance at the international level.
You might need it, yes. Maybe if could give you your... Parce que, en effet, cette table ronde...
Because yes, indeed, this is going to be a bilingual roundtable. Uwe is going to speak English, and we have with us Éric BANEL. Good morning. You are General Director of Maritime Affairs, Fisheries and Aquaculture. Good morning. To begin with, well, you don't need that because you're going to be able to speak in English. Uwe has prepared a quick presentation to set the scene, so to speak, to explain what we're talking about when we're talking about container loss. What does that mean in terms of volumes and numbers of containers? What is at stake? What increase? You have 2 minutes and 83 slides, Uwe, so we agree, right?
20 minutes, please. 20 minutes, yeah. We had 1 year in the winter 20 and 21 between. We had a great container loss, and this wakes us all up. And I have some statistics there. 3,000 boxes and lost aboard in only 80 days, and this was very surprising. So we in the Loss Prevention Committee of IUMI and in all markets, we had a wake-up call on that. But this is a statistical super high, and ships are definitely made to bring cargo from A to B and B to A, and then, and then not losing it at sea. Shall I proceed? Shall I give?
You may.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, good morning from my side. I have only 19.5 minutes, and I try to be super quick because Cécile is after me. And she's a definitely dangerous lady. So I hope to find my screens. Yes, this is a very short agenda, and I'm rushing through, beginning with the MSC SOE and the introduction. We are all dominated by pictures. If you see these pictures, we are remember Brea, Erica, and the other catastrophes of tankers in Alaska. And now we see these pictures. These pictures remains us on MSC SOE, and cargo in the water makes rubbish on the beach. This is the MSC SOE in the next port of call. This is Bremerhaven, and we see clearly here from the bird eye view, some bays are hardly affected and some bays are not. And this gives us food thoughts. The next winter in 2021, we had a great loss. This is not only from the next one, just from different ships, 8 or 9 ships at all. Here, the Cosco Nagovia, and this is just the super loss of these winter. This is the Apus 1. Apus 1 lost around 1,800 containers. That means more than 3,400 TU overboards in only one night. And if you have a look at these boxes here, I don't know if you would like the cargo in there is your cargo or you are the insurer of that cargo over there. Yeah, statistic of class of container lost at sea, and this is made by the World Shipping Council. And be sure, World Shipping Council would only count the containers that they really lost. They don't want to count them double or twice. So we have an average between 400-500 up to 1,500, but this year they included the ML Comfort. So at the end, this year, the winter between 20 and 21 is a very extreme, very extreme winter. Very extreme losses. Development of boxes and their stability. I try to be quick. I was brought up as an officer on these ships, the very first one, and I thought these ships are big. No, I missed it. The development was totally different. In 35 years, we got huge ships, and they left the lengths to up to 400 meters and more, and the width up to 61 meters. And all these ships has to withstand this, and this is only weather. So this is not unusual. You will find that in wintertime in the North Atlantic and in the North Pacific or South Pacific day by day. The development of container ships started with normal raters. These raters had a length of 160 meters and a width of 21 meters. That means a ratio around 8:1. And this is the Idealis X, the very first container vessel. It was a former tanker, reconstructed as a container vessel, and at the end, a ratio from 8:1, exactly, as a typical rater. Then we had this development, and we left this ratio, and now when we talk about stability and ship stability, we have to talk stability ashore. This is stability ashore, and this is the meaning. And to show you I'm a strong man, I try to break it, and this is the result. But the understanding of stability at sea is different. If you touch this tumbler, the stability at sea means how long does it take to come upright again, like on board of a ship. If you have the mass down in the ship will get very quickly upright. If you distribute the mass up to the top of the ship, you will have a very soft ship. Once a stiff ship, once a soft ship. And if you distribute the cargo through 3/3 up and empty containers on the top, then you have a middle stability, and this is comfortable not only for human, for cargo, and for the ship. And that means, yes, slow acceleration for the cargo on the very top there. This from down here up to there is 21 containers. It's like a skyscraper at sea. So slow acceleration for the cargo, high acceleration if the ship is super stiff, and then you might have some problems. This is a blue ship, but I think it is a French company. These new ships have different measures, and they have a ratio from 7:1, and this ratio tends to have higher stability, higher cargo, and higher stability. Compared with the rater starting with 8:1, now 7:1. And there's another super difference between these both ships. Raters do not have deck cargo or only very small deck cargo. These container ships, nearly all of container ships, have 50 to 60% of their cargo on deck. This is a super cheap idea. For raters, you need 100% ship for the cargo. For containers, you need only 40% ship. So you only have 40% ship, but 100% cargo. It's a great idea for cheap transport. But different acceleration because the cargo is super high on deck as well. So top tier. Talking about top tier, we have to talk about some problems. The stability of boxes, stability of lashing equipment, stability, the divergency of stow plan and actual plan, verified gross mass, design, in and off design conditions, and parametric and synchronous rolling is part of them. Top tier was founded mainly by 3 flag states: Netherlands, Australia, and Germany. Netherlands and Germany due to the fact of the MSC SOE, and Australia is part due to the fact that the APL London lost cargo overboard in the Australian waters. And be sure, when Australians hate anything is if anyone drops anything to their waters what do not belong to their waters. So they are rolling in the deep, means cutting out in the top tier project, cutting out the edges and look cut by cut in the edges. How is the quality of steel? Is it enough, or is it too weak, too old? Maybe due to the fact that we had these breakouts of twist here of twist, super rusty twist locks and these corner castings. At the top tier project we had a model test. These are 11 containers in a model in a scale 6:1, and they tested them on an earthquake simulator in Japan, simulating the movement of the ship, and they had a lot of hundreds of measure points to check the front side, the door side, the lashing equipment, the twist locks under the lashing bridge, up the lashing bridge, to get an impression how such a stack will move on board of a ship. And this is the divergency between the stow plan and the actual stow on board. We checked it in the, some guys checked it in the top tier project, and the red, sorry. Yeah, the red boxes, I don't know, this is back. The red boxes here are misstows, up to 92%, and this is more or less normal. 10 to 15% of the cargo has a different stow on, or a different position than the stow plan deemed to have. And that is a definitely problem. Why? A stack is planned for one column, one stack, and is secured by its own, like a tree standing alone in the forest. And if you mix up and you change the weight from 30 tons down here, up here, then the securing system is overdone, and you will have some problems, and this will be the result. And not only one stack, there's a stack beside and beside and beside, and so it will occur that you will lose a complete bay. Verified gross mass. Also, the Australians had a deep look inside, and they checked 3 million, more than 3 million boxes, and having a result of more or less 1.1% of the containers with overweight. This is a great number. Keeping in mind 20,000 TEU ships, that means 10,000 boxes, 5,000 under deck, 5,000 on deck, minimum 5 containers with an overweight on deck. This is definitely too much. It's quite easy to weigh them like these with a reach stacker, so there's no need to have a wrong verified gross mass. In and off design, I want to give you an impression of in and off design. Ships are built for a defined conditions, but sailing in a tropical storm, grounding, blackout, and parametric and synchronous rolling are not in these defined conditions. And I want to give you a short impression of parametric rolling. That's it. If the waves are half as long as the ship is, it can occur some parametric rolling. And here's my backup, super quick, and you see this is a tough rolling, and if you will see that at sea, it is super tough for the seafarers. What have they to know at sea? Know the direction of the waves, know the length of the waves, know the roll frequency of the waves and of your ship, measure the wave interval, and when the wavelength is half as long as the ship, take immediate action and find a safe course. In all this in such a weather. And in North Pacific and in the North Atlantic, we have 14 to 15 hours in the winter darkness. You won't see what's happened out there, you only will hear this. So welcome to the show. We need weather routing, and weather routing is a great job. This is a low in the North Pacific. You see here is a routing for a container vessel, more or less great circle, and this ship is advised to shelter here, to shelter behind the Aleutian Islands. 24 hours, more or less, stop, shelter, hide behind the island due to the storm, and then proceed to Seattle. So. And this is from Storm Geo. There are other companies like Storm Geo. They work together with the Classification Society, and they produce a weather routing combined with the parameters of the ship, the stability and parameters of the ship, so they can predict a weather zone where the ship is in danger to run into parametric rolling. So you won't get a weather forecast, you will get a forecast where the danger of parametric rolling occurs in the Pacific or Atlantic Ocean, wherever you are sailing. So the captain and the officers had the chance to navigate around this danger. And if you are in the problem, in the storm, you will have these polar diagrams, and helps you to avoid the parametric as well. So why now? I'm very often asked, why now? Uwe, why only in that winter? It's quite easy. We had the recovery, the economic recovery in China, and these are the prices here coming up of container transport. The blue line is China to US West Coast, and the red line is China to Western Europe. The prices are jumping, really exploding, and at that time the ships were full of containers until the very, very last position, stow position on deck, 100%. 15 to 20 years before, we never saw full container vessels. That means we had a reserve in the strengths of the securing system. With 100% of cargo, there's no reserve, and all mistakes in storm run out, and then in the cargo in the water, and that means rubbish on the beach. What does the insurance industry do? Collaboration with Top Tier. Oh no, sorry, that was too quick. Collaboration with Top Tier, getting information to IMO. Without IMO, you won't change anything at sea. And the important steps are: stow plan should not be a wishful thinking. A stow plan should be a stow plan, and the stow should be as the stow plan said. Then we need a verified gross mass that is verified, not only lying on paper, and the ship crew needs to support by weather routing. Yeah, the information sent by IUMI, not only, but supported by IUMI to IMO. This is the whole information, and better than rubbish on the beach is to have this drink, but don't ask me of the name of this drink. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Uwe, for your presentation. Your presentation last year was very much appreciated. Same again this year. And thank you so much for sticking to the schedule. We're almost early. Éric, BANEL, perhaps a quick word of response. The French government, what is its view on the matter? I do believe that you had a few slides that you wanted to present as well, but perhaps we could hear a few thoughts from you on that presentation. Beyond the question of these container ships. Well, I can start my presentation whenever you wish to, but first of all, I wanted to extend my thanks to Parimat and its team for choosing to highlight this issue this year. This is a topic which is seldom discussed, and yet which is more and more important. This is something that we are discussing more, but perhaps not as much as we should. So thank you so much for highlighting this topic. We are in our department in charge of maritime policy for the French government, for harbors, but also for the marine environment, for marine salvage operations, fisheries, etc. Many topics, very different topics indeed. And this might seem, this topic of overboarding and containers lost at sea, like it might be a small issue, and yet it's gaining in traction. First of all, since, as was said earlier on, because France is also a shipping country. So, of course, it is in our interest vis-à-vis our companies to take this issue into consideration. And most of all, France is a coastal state. The French state was very much in first line on the front of pollution due to hydrocarbons, and now we are also very much affected by the issue of pollution because of containers. And without further ado, perfect segue into my presentation. First of all, a few figures that I wanted to remind you of. Now, every year, you might think that there are not so many containers that are going overboard, 1,629 containers per year. This might not seem like a significant figure, but as a matter of fact, this is a growing figure, plus 18% since 2008. And most of all, the consequences are larger and larger beyond the cases which were recalled earlier on by Uwe. I wanted to remind you of perhaps cases which were not so iconic, but very much highlighted in France. First of all, with Maersk Zenborg, which is a container ship of average size, and it lost a large number of its containers in 2014. And these containers were specific in the sense that they were part of the traffic separation scheme in the north of France. So from the north of Pas-de-Calais and from the north of Cherbourg and the north of Brittany. So that's our scheme for the all of the ports in the north of France. So where we have the most part of European traffic. And so we found ourselves with hundreds of containers. So definitely when it comes to maritime security, that was a huge issue. And with our teams at the CROSS, our regional center for salvage operations at sea, they were put in the first line. And also on the beaches of North Brittany, there were not ducks, but rather TV kind of equipment, so hi-fi equipment, but there were also balls of plastic, so plastic granules, which are a scourge today. So that's the first example I wanted to speak to you about, which impacted us as a coastal state and was definitely across the media. The other example was of the Jacques Vabre race. We in France take part organize a number of these events, and there was a boat which unfortunately had an impact with a container that was lost at sea. And that goes to show that to date, we do not know how to process these non-identified floating objects, as we call them. Most of the time, once they're at sea, we cannot identify them, we cannot see them, and they are, for the most part, undersea, so they're a great danger. Uwe, thank you so much for reminding us of the root causes, but I wanted to somehow highlight a couple of them. First of all, failure to stow and secure. Also, container overloading, and the packing defects. A good few things amongst these causes are due to the way that people handle, track such containers. From the since July the 1st, 2016, we've worked on certification methods for declaring the gross weight of each container, the so-called VGM acronym in English. So that's a way to check that your container is correctly identified with regards to what's inside of it, but also with regards to its mass, so as to position it correctly on board. On an international level, the rules have not really changed for the past 20 years, up until the action which was taken a couple of years ago. And it was a decisive move with the IMO and various regional declarations. If you'll excuse me, I see a number of you taking pictures, but the presentations will be made available to you later on, both the replay and the presentation. So feel free to take pictures, but, you know, the presentations will be made available. So there are two main international conventions under the IMO. First of all, MARPOL on harmful substances, and SOLAS on the safeguarding of life at sea. Both of these covenants had changed and had been amended to take into consideration mandatory reports for containers shipping harmful, dangerous goods. So that was the entry gate into strengthened reporting rules. But beyond the question of dangerous goods, there weren't really any mandates internationally. So Europe decided to take action rather quickly with a directive, which is ironic for lost containers. The directive dates back to 2002 and to 2012. So with that directive, it is now compulsory to declare lost containers. And then we also have a model for declaring lost containers, which was developed by the EU. In 2012, mind you, I was the director for French shippers. I was on the darker side, shall we say, on the game. And now I've been in charge of that file in particular. This was a project which was launched in 2012 with ship owners, NGOs, and authorities. And the fact that NGOs were involved was a first. Surfriders, for example, this is a small NGO from Biarritz, which you may know, and earlier on they decided to tackle that kind of a topic, so they were involved. And France decided to carry this project forward, first of all, by raising awareness. Objectively, in 2012-2013, this was a topic that interested virtually no one. And at the IMO, it was very hard to discuss that matter, since given the figures and the growth of container ships worldwide, it was considered as non-significant. So it took time and a few accidents, as we presented, for this topic to be on the agenda. And 10 years on, at the CCC8 IMO subcommittee, which is in charge of containers and cargo, so the specialized body in charge of topics in relation with cargo and containers more specifically. And within that subcommittee, along with other European states, more specifically on the basis of a study report we had ordered with the Serena back in the day, well, we came up with a number of proposals, and one of them was to install a mandatory report for any lost container at sea. That declaration was up until then limited to dangerous packed goods, and now our goal was to make that mandatory for all containers lost at sea. Now, there's also something else which is very important. Within the IMO, we wanted states to accept to work on the identification and traceability of lost containers. That will be the next step. Once the reports are made, we need to be in a position to make it compulsory for ship owners to comply with traceability rules to track all lost containers. That was the work that was done, but in parallel, something else was done, which was very important on ISO standards and on CPU code of good practices. So beyond these mandatory rules, there are projects which are undertaken on best practices, and as shared with the entire sector. That was developed, and it's very helpful, and it's been widely accepted by ship owners around the world. CC8 adopted, submitted the project, and that led to a centralization, a world centralization scheme. The so-called G6 for any lost containers at sea, and for any difficulty which may be faced by the flagging state or by the coastal state. Earlier on, we spoke of how important data is, and of this I'm particularly convinced. So that system is a great way to share data on the world level. It's managed by the IMO, and being able to share data with regards to lost containers at sea, that was a really important request. I said that earlier on, there are 1,029 containers lost at sea every year, and that data comes from a player that we know really well, which is a single a player gathering all shipholders, but we do not have any other consolidated data. But now, with that new system via the IMO, we'll be able to have objective data, and we'll be able to share that objective data with everyone concerned. With regards to the next steps now, 31st of May to the 9th of June, that was very recent. So a subcommittee presented to the Committee for Maritime Security this new proposal, and it was adopted, and now there will be a plenary assembly held in 2024 to approve on a world level the standards I presented to you for the mandatory reports in case of lost containers at sea. And then these rules should be implemented as of the 1st of January 2026 if all goes to plan. In parallel, with these new approved standards, every ship owner will have to have a loading software adapted to secure its load and to track all losses at sea. One last point of advancement, which is significant. This will be an emergency towing system for large ships other than oil tankers. It happens only very seldom, and that's a provision we really wanted to introduce. And indeed, once it is known that a container is lost at sea, there should be a possibility to stow it, to take responsibility for it. One last slide on what is to be expected after 2026 with regards to our capacity to track containers lost at sea. This might seem rather simple, but for a number of ship owners, it's is looking like a rather remote horizon. So first of all, the idea would be to have an alert system when the container goes overboard. And indeed, sometimes the ship owner does not know that they have lost a container. So having an alert system would be triggered whenever a container touches the water to identify the drop zone. And then traceability. You can track the container in various ways. Either you can follow up, and that would be ideal, but it would be rather costly. So you would be able to track the container no matter where it goes. And then if the container goes under the sea, of course, that would involve other things in terms of its capacity to keep emitting a signal undersea. So that would be option A. Or we could have software to help us extrapolate on the available data and find the lost container. We're working with a Sea Track box, and this is a project we'll be presenting shortly at the IMO. As I said, the IMO has started to work with states on this topic with the CCC8 subcommittee. And with that next step, first of all, we'll have a very clear snapshot of what happens to prevent lost containers at sea, and to make sure that they do not go ashore, and to intervene as early as possible. This is really something that we've been actively working on in France. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup pour cette...
Thank you so much for this very clear presentation. Perhaps we can circulate a couple of microphones around the room if you have any questions for any of our speakers. And Ove, maybe you would like to respond to what was just presented by Éric. If you would like to perhaps share a few comments, a few thoughts on the presentation.
Said.
I just hear the translation. So, yeah, this is great. Thank you for your presentation. And you got an idea. And at IMO, everything is slowly. It's like swimming in honey for a fly. So super slow. But when 175 states are working together, it's slower than in our local areas. Yeah, it's great to have a system to register the containers lost. I think it's better to don't lose them at sea. So we are working very intense not to lose them, a very small number. And if it's DG cargo over there, it's super good to have a pinger on board. Give me a ping to found me in that moment when the container touched salt water. So, but it's not so easy. It costs money, and shipping companies do not have money. Believe me, they do not earn money. They do not have any money for nothing. Not for firefighting, not for pingers, not for whatever. But the logistic will come, and the logistics guys offshore, they want to know where their container is. And this is an idea to get, okay, give me 5 cents more and there's a pinger in the container. Great. You see, we are working on the same page, and think this is a good news, but there's a long way to go.
Est-ce qu'il y a des questions dans la salle? Je sais que c'est toujours difficile.
Do we have any questions? Sir, over to you. Patrice Gilbert from Blue Vault. I used to work at the Sésame. My question is, if you can track containers lost at sea, I would imagine that this will be reported straight to the goods owners and to their insurance companies. Yes, that is the goal indeed, to integrate the entire chain. Who asked the question? Gentleman here. Okay. So the idea would be to integrate the entire chain. And if I may insist on what was just said, we really want to have that international action, since though sometimes things do take time, but we are convinced that this is something that should be taken up to the world level. And France is convinced that we could act quicker on a European level, but if we want that to be efficient, we need to have that world action. So internationally, all players will be involved. Ship owners on the one hand, of course, but also all of the associations in charge of cargo, the entire logistics chain, and we are working with them in these specialized subcommittees, which are very technical, but which have been very helpful.
Additional command. This is great to have to realize where containers are lost at sea. Remember, the MSC Soil lost on 6 different positions container, and they realized firstly the last position. Okay, we are losing containers. So in a storm case, it's so noisy on board of a ship so that you won't realize losing containers. It's great to realize it in the ship, and be sure the insurance will get quick to the information. Oh, my container is lost overboard. Please pay me money. So this is pay the loss, and that's great.
Moi, j'avais une question de BO.
I have a question. When a container is falling at sea, is there any kind of civil responsibility that comes into play? Well, it all depends on who's behind the container. So, for example, the ship owner might be deemed responsible, but then you have those goods, and in the very same container, there might be various types of goods from various types of players. So our difficulty when we go and look for the right contact points, that leads us to other issues. Beyond the lost container, what's inside the container, who is the owner of the goods, and sometimes it's really hard to find that information. But the more efficient, the more streamlined the process and the scheme, the more responsive we will be. And for any problem of pollution, our number one problem is to always identify what's inside of the container. Sometimes we need to go beyond the manifesto and how dangerous are these goods and how can we tackle them? And that takes time.
Indeed, the problem, but if the container is lost, you cannot check what was in the container. Was it packed perfectly? Was there any misdeclared cargo? Was there cargo securing, or was the lashing gear for some ships, older ships, too old, or rusty turnbuckles or rusty twist locks? The container is gone, so it's very difficult to get after it. In one case, the Australians came on board and put the captain directly into prison, but Australians are different working, so they do not like throwing things in their water. So, and they found rusty twist locks, rusty turnbuckles, container sockets totally corroded. Then clearly there is a responsibility. But on a normal ship, the blue ship, as you see there, so in my presentation, French company, excellent ship, excellent working. So that's very difficult to say what happened.
Vous serez réinvité, Uwe.
That's fine. Thank you. I believe there was a question here, right here. Mr. BANEL, thank you so much for being here with us. I have a little bit of a controversial question, perhaps, that I wanted to ask you. Earlier on, you presented the discussions that would be held within the IMO, and you'll be working with a C-track box as part of that project. And indeed, having the right data is important, and there's a growing number of companies specialized in these matters. But TrackSense is another champion. I'm no shareholder of that company, but TrackSense, they have as shareholders Maersk, MSC, CMA, and perhaps could you share a few thoughts on why you decided to opt for a C-track box? Well, it's not that we made a choice in particular. I mean, we are in charge of innovation in the maritime sector, and our current minister wants us to support all companies innovating in the sector. And so they come to us, these players, and the player that came to us with the most advanced solutions for a go-to-market is this company in particular. So that's why we opted for them. But should a player come to us in the future with the very same level of availability and capacity to make that presentation, that's something that we can organize at IMO level, just like we did in other sectors and for other subjects. And that's our added value as friends. First of all, we have a strong voice within the IMO, and indeed we are considered at the IMO as a credible facilitator of international commissions, as is the case for decarbonization right now, for example. And we're here to promote both ideas, but also proposals, Because if you come to the IMO, which is a very technical organization in the right sense of the term, if you only come forward to the IMO with ideas such as traceability is great, let's do that, but you have absolutely nothing to put on the table, nothing concrete, then it will not be to any avail, because the number one question which they will ask will be, are there available technologies and as at a reasonable cost? As you were saying, Uwe, cost is the second question that is being asked in any topic of discussion. So France has also strongly committed towards another technology with Ensenab, and it is France's responsibility to support a number of players, many of them French, of course, I will not say the contrary, but to show that certain solutions are possible and that we're not inventing something which is not existing. Okay, so I'm taking this as a call for the market, and let me share another very simple example with you. When we started to work on a number of other topics in 2005, 2006, for example, on ship ballast, well, a number of companies said, look, careful, there isn't any technologies which can be marketed right now at a reasonable price for ballast water. And we thought, okay, first of all, let's define the direction we want to take, and let's support the technologies which will make progress in the next 10 years. And then everything happened. The market adapted itself to the standard which was being implemented. There are still a few adjustments to be found, but it's on the right track. And our role is to lead the market on a number of iconic subjects.
Excusez-moi.
I'm sorry. Hello. Louis Chironet. I'm a master's student. And I'm also working at the Garex. A minute ago, you were talking about costs. Do you have any economic figures in mind that we could digest regarding the economic impact of containers lost at sea? Uwe talked about it somewhat, so I'll let him start, and then I might add to that about the economic impact of CLES.
Who you're asking? If you ask a reinsurer, they said, okay, one container 40 foot is 100,000 euro, and if you ask a normal insured 50,000 euros per container in average. Some of them more, some of them less. On the very top, you know, they are mostly empty container, but that is a figure that helps definitely. And keeping in mind that one lost container is about 50,000 euros, and the follow-up has the cost of 3 up to 5 times more cost generating, because the cargo is not there where the cargo should belong. But to have an idea, 50,000 per 40-foot box, this is a good average price for the cargo in a container.
Je crois qu'on a une question à droite là.
I think we've got a question on the right there, sir. Thank you. I simply wanted to add, but go ahead, sir. Add to the price, yes. Well, you need to keep in mind that the costs are not necessarily just the direct costs. So you've got the insurance cost, of course, you've got the intervention cost that is carried directly for the loss of container, but you've got also major pollution effects, and you can also have over accidents. And so the two issues are maritime safety. If a container causes a major accident on another container carrier or an oil tanker, another type of boat, then that can run into the hundreds of millions. And there's also the environmental impact. Now, if you have to clean up Britain beaches with plastic pellets, as was covered widely in the media a year ago, then I was at the SCHIEDER in Brest, which is an accidental maritime pollution expert. So the French government, with support from the local authorities, spent over 3 million euros cleaning the beaches and getting them clean again. And so these are also high costs associated. Thank you. I'm from Madagascar. You were talking about Trackbox and other companies that would be involved in tracking containers. I think that there would be an extra cost for shipping itself, the container cost, that will be passed on to the customers. Do we already know roughly what the cost will be? Because the problem is that there are extra charges on freight and all that, and this is getting really, really cumbersome. So are there going to be extra costs now? Could we have ballpark an estimate of the price range, the extra cost? Because that might be mandatory for some. This is a system that will be fitted onto containers. Uwe?
I like the questions concerning money. That's absolutely great. A transport of container from Japan or from China, wherever in China to Western Europe, it's about 500, 600, 800 euros. A transport from a container from Hamburg, maybe to Munich, costs more. And if you have to spend 2 euros more for a container transport from China to Western Europe, from Western Europe to China, or from China to West Coast US, or wherever all over the world, I think 2 euros combined with hundreds, and even the transport on ashore is cheaper than sea transport. So this matters no one. Nowhere, no one. If there are 10,000 laptops in and one laptop is a 0.000 cent more expensive afterwards, spending money on tracking and tracing. So this is, no one minds that. Only shipping lines, and they earned a huge heap of money in the last 2 years, a huge heap of money. So I think they can invest a few cents on tracking and tracing. I'm happy with that.
Alors, je pense que là-dessus, on est vraiment.
I think that on that, we really see eye to eye with Uwe, and we fully understand each other. All standards now, all international standards carry a cost. Of course, that's why I was talking about reasonable cost. This is something we keep in mind, of course. And on that, we are having a very free and open discussion with the industry. But that shouldn't keep us from making progress, and that won't keep us from making progress. In 3 weeks, there will be the IMO Environmental Protection Committee. And so, of course, all this tracking and tracing will have a cost, probably more expensive than the maritime pollution standards will cost more than the tracking and tracing systems. But I mean, we own these costs, and now consumers, if they're consistent in their approach, it's in their best interest that these environmental standards, and we could also about social standards, that they should be covered by all ship owners worldwide. And just one last thing on that. International standards are also a guarantee that competition is fair for everyone. I think that for ship owners it's also important. This is an argument. The level playing field should be guaranteed for all. And so it's better for a ship owner that this standard is adopted at the global level so that the costs are passed on to everyone, and so that there are as few distortions of competition as possible. I think we've got time for a very last question. There was the one over there on the left. I'm Mr. Mourabi, a Sesame surveyor in Morocco. Oh, well, first of all, congratulations for your presentations, which were brilliant, and we learned a lot. But the question I have, why are we still building giant ships? We could see that gigantism in shipbuilding, whereas containers lost at sea are run in huge numbers, and the problem is the loss of dangerous cargo at sea, and which is going to cause pollution, marine pollution. And now everybody is talking about safeguarding the environment, but I can see that in the future we're going to build bigger and bigger container ships, 25,000 TEUs. Isn't that a danger to navigation? Well, that's a trick question, and I'll give you very little time to answer it. Well, we'll go quickly. Well, first of all, international standards are changing and getting more and more stringent very quickly, so the new ships, whatever they are also environmentally, in terms of their whole structure, regarding the applicable standards in terms of emissions, they are much more efficient and much more able to withstand the various conditions that we talked about. So these new ships are not necessarily the main causes now of new pollution, be it from containers or other vectors. Remember that these are new builds. Then what is the right level of TUs, 20-foot equivalent units, to have on ships? We've been talking about it for 10 years. It's been on the table for 10 years. People have been saying, we won't go above 20,000. Now we're reaching 25,000. So as a public authority, I don't have an answer. And there shouldn't be a standard, an international standard, saying don't go above 20,000 TUs. That's not how it's going to happen. But I think the challenge is really to make sure that whatever happens on these new ships, we have better management and total control of all the associated risks. At any rate, this is what we're working on. We're working on standards and support, working on ship structures, but not really on the absolute number of containers. Uwe, quickly.
We are working very hard on standards and the quality of the ships, but we are always behind the time, 10, 15 years. But why are they building 24, 25,000 TU vessels? No one forbids it. That's the question. And the misbelief is that the economy of scale is still there. But the best economy of scale factor is between 14 and 16,000. And then the giantistics or gigantomanie in German comes to an end. So I think we won't see 30,000 TU vessels, but we will see more and more 20, 80 or 22,000 vessels. The horizontal growth will come not to an end because ships are sailing slower, saving fuel, so we need more ships, and I'm afraid we will see more and more one of these giants, and not only one. There's an order for, I think, 2.5 up to 3 million TU of new builds, nearly all of them on super big ships. So your friends come in more and more. Congratulations.
On va devoir conclure, c'est presque l'heure. Alors je vais vous demander juste s'il y a...
Let's wrap up. It's almost time. If there's just one message to take away from this panel.
Yeah, take care for your containers and and know what are you doing in a container and on board of ships, and yeah, have an eye on the development of the huge ships, and have an eye on the whole technique, the responsibilities in the shipping lines, in transporting, in the whole transport industry. And we as a insurance industry, we should take part and responsibility with the loss prevention committee, for example, at IUMI.
Éric, et ce sera le mot de la fin.
Je vais prendre un petit peu de hauteur et je dirais...
Éric, your final word. Well, I'll really take a helicopter view. We should really put the maritime transport topic on the agenda of civil society. Consumers should be aware that shipping is a social and environmental challenge for everybody. We've really focused these last few years on production modes, on fair trade, on any number of things. Well, shipping is still very often a forgotten topic. I can see that things are moving, but moving very slowly. So we need to raise awareness about that. Containers loss is one subject amongst many, so maritime shipping should be given its proper place. We should promote it when it's environmentally and socially efficient, and we should talk about all these topics. Thank you so much to the two of you. Thank you. I'll invite you to go back down to your seat. A quick advertising break, and then we'll be back together for the Student Award.
Thank you very much. It was great, and we had 10 minutes more Bonjour Saline. Super. Bonjour. Eh ben super.
Allô? Oui, s'il vous plaît.
Hello, yes, please. Please, this is a quick break. If you would please be so kind as to stay on for the student who is going to receive an award, this would be extremely appreciated. Well, we're back for the Student Award. For this ceremony, I am with Jean-Paul Thomas. You're the head of the Transport, Insurance and Companies Department at France Assureur. We'll keep the suspense up, although we know it's a young woman who won. Jean-Paul, please explain how the award is given and tell us about its history, how it was and when it was created and what's the underlying goal. Well, I know that time is short, so I'll try to be very brief, but in 2015, the organizing committee of the PARIMAT conference thought it would be good to highlight our topics, the various matters in terms of insurance, law firms, and legal experts via an award that will be given maybe not to research work, but at least to a master's degree student, not necessarily in maritime insurance, but also maritime shipping and economic aspects. So since 2015, we've been giving a special student award. Several students have already come on stage. Now a young woman is going to come on stage in a minute. The award, well, the way we're organized is that sometimes we get a large number of theses. Sometimes we had 15 or